Fernando has driven for quite a few teams. His rookie year started with Minardi. He then went to Renault, McLaren, Renault again, Ferrari, McLaren again, and now Alpine, which is just Renault again. So he has been around. He has homie hopped, as Megan would like to say. He has not always ended on the best terms with these teams, and I don't want to rag on the guy, so I won't get too into his controversies, but they're there. He is not above taking his ex back. The man loves hitting up old flames.
All right, welcome back to Break Check. This is episode 26, getting to know Alpine, walking through both the team's history and the driver's history. Juan, how was your weekend before we get into it? I know we went karting over the weekend as well.
Yeah, my weekend was really good. Let me readjust myself. You can see my thighs. I don't think I've ever shown waist down on the show before. Yeah, my weekend was good. We went karting Saturday, met up with some of my girlfriend's friends that she hadn't seen in a while since she got back from Europe. I did something on Friday, but I can't quite remember what it was, but I do know that it was fun. I went to the movies. I saw Nope at the movie theater.
Oh, my sister saw that too. I heard it was okay.
I really liked it, actually. I was a big fan.
She liked it. She said it could have been shorter. I think she said it felt like it could be consolidated.
It wasn't even that long.
I know. I think she's just impatient.
Yeah, I get it. But yeah, my weekend was good. How was yours?
It was pretty good. Obviously we went karting over the weekend. See that content on our Instagram if you're interested, and our TikTok as well. But yeah, and then on Sunday, my dad and I went to a brewery. That's kind of like one thing that we do together is like go to breweries or brewery tours and stuff. So I wanted to get one in there before I move. So
nice. That sounds fun. So when I was a little kid, I'm sorry, I'm readjusting my camera here. I did not like everyone seeing the top of my thighs. So we've readjusted. I went to the Budweiser, big brewery, because my dad worked for Budweiser for 20 years. It was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. So I definitely want to try stuff like that.
Yeah, and Milwaukee has a ton if you ever go there. Yeah, there's so many.
Yeah, any of our non-Wisconsin listeners, if you like beer, we have a place for you.
Yeah. This really just is the place for you, but
yes. Yeah, so did we have any news to cover before we get into Alpine?
Right. So first thing I saw when I woke up this morning was that Antonio Giovinazzi would be testing 2 different races for Haas this year. I think of all drivers that I would bring back and or pick that like haven't been in F1 yet, Antonio Giovinazzi is definitely not on that list. Yes, do I like him as a person? But he is like, think of like Latifi, but just like Latifi, really.
Yeah.
Kind of a nice guy, seems fine as a person, but like he didn't even have points in FE. And like, yes, I know people are saying it's the car too, but you can blame the car all the time, but he's still not driving it well either. So I just think of all of the people that they have at their toes, that if they were to bring back someone, he would not be on my list. So
not at the top.
I don't know what. No, I would genuinely probably, I don't know if I would take Latifi instead of Giovinazzi, but I honestly would take Stroll over Giovinazzi.
I'm not sure if Haas is going to take Schumacher over Giovinazzi. I don't know if they're having him test to like put some pressure or something.
I think they did say, so Steiner had said that they're in conversation. What they told Mick that they need to see before they give him his contract is points. So if he can just score freaking like P9 the next couple of races, I think he's got to see. I don't think, and then also too, I'm sure Giovinazzi in the first round of testing will replace Magnussen so they can see comparison of him and Mick. And then they'll probably put him up against Mag just to see where he's at, in comparison to Mick. But if Mick is outscoring Giovinazzi in free practice,
yeah,
I think Mick has nothing to worry about, to be honest.
No.
And I also don't think he's going to have anything to worry about in general because Antonio hasn't even tested the new F1 cars yet. So it's going to be pretty tough for him, I think, to adjust. It was already hard for him to adjust to the F1 cars that he was sitting in for 2 years. So
Yeah, yeah. I think Mick's biggest competition here is himself, not
yeah.
Giovinazzi. I think as long as he races how he knows, we know he can race. I think if he
Yeah.
qualifies and puts himself in position to score points, I think he'll
Yeah.
be fine.
So I love the summer break because I think it really like amps everyone back up and gets them in a good position so that like if you are still capable of doing something, you'll see it in the next couple of races. So
Yeah, absolutely. It's race week.
yeah. And it's race week. Finally.
Um, I know Kimi Räikkönen made his NASCAR debut. Did you catch how
I
he did?
watched it. I watched it. He qualified in 27th, which was pretty low, but pretty expected. He had never been in a NASCAR race
Mhm.
before. And maybe by the time I was halfway through, he was already up in like P8, P7. So he had gone up almost 20
Yeah.
positions. And then I can't remember who it was now, but someone pretty much bumped him in the back and crashed him out. And he ended up not finishing the race, obviously. So pretty unfortunate to see. I want to see the viewership decline after he was out, like especially in Europe.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a great number, but yeah. All right, so kicking it off with Alpine's team. Now, while Alpine was technically only formed in 2021 as its own Formula One team, the origin of this team dates back to the 80s. So in 1981, it started as Tolman before being bought by the Benetton Group in 1986. And many Formula One fans will recognize Benetton Group. In 1995, they won the Constructors' Championship, and then both the 1994 and 1995 Drivers' Championships with Michael Schumacher, who's one of the most well-known drivers. And then in 2000, Renault had bought the team, and in 2002, the name was fully changed to the Renault F1 team, which then in 2005 and 2006, under the Renault name, they won the Constructor and Drivers' Championship with Fernando Alonso, also a known driver.
Mhm.
Then in 2011, Lotus Cars became a sponsor and they changed their name to the Lotus Renault F1 team. But then shortly after, they became the majority stakeholder and then changed their name to Lotus F1 team. Didn't do too much with Lotus F1, but they remained that until 2015 when Renault bought it back. And in 2016 through 2020, raced under the Renault Sport Formula One team. So just, yeah, a lot of names.
This team has gone through some name changes.
A lot of
It's
sponsor changes.
yeah. It's actually funny. Like I didn't connect the dots because I obviously I know Renault is Alpine, but Fernando Alonso is currently racing for a team that he's raced for like two
Yes.
separate times previously. Very confusing timeline, but I think you did a good job of laying it out for us.
Yeah. Also, I think Alonso, it's so interesting for how long he's been in F1. It also kind of shows with how many teams he's raced with, but it's kind of cool to see him technically back with the same team, even though so many of the people are different, especially in the Alpine refresh.
Yeah, we'll get into it. He has
Mhm.
raced for multiple teams more than once.
Yeah.
It's unreal. I think you called him a homie hopper the
I
other day.
did
I
call
thought
him a
that was
homie
very
hopper.
funny.
So many Drive to Survive fans will remember Renault for its iconic team boss and French engineer Cyril. I don't want to pronounce his last name because I forgot to Google how to pronounce it, and I don't want to embarrass myself. So Juan, if you want to take that one away,
Habitable,
Abitable, Abitable,
habitable. I think,
Cyril Boole, we're gonna call him C Boole.
or Cyril.
Cyril, yeah, just Cyril. He unfortunately left at the end of 2020 during that Alpine refresh. But he was part of the Renault group for about 20 years, just through different positions, and made it up all the way to managing director, starting in 2014 until his departure. I don't know if you want to touch on him at all, Juan, but yeah, I remember I
Uh,
loved him in Drive to Survive.
just one of my favorite F1 personalities, F1 employees. If you watch Drive to Survive, he's a main character. Especially with Daniel coming over to Red Bull or coming over to Renault, and then Daniel eventually leaving Renault for McLaren. Cyril gets emotional. Like he
Yeah.
wears his emotions on his sleeve. But I think he was good at his job. I think I was sad to see him leave, and I hope he's back in F1 someday.
Yeah. I was looking into it because I was actually pretty curious as to why they got rid of him because he seemed to be such a big part of the team. But I know that final year that Daniel was in, they were expected to be in third or fourth in the
Mhm.
constructors. And because they didn't get there, they cut him, which
Yeah.
is pretty cutthroat. But I get it if you're not getting to the best potential that you could be. And then you see them now. And I do think that the current leader is incredible. Lauren
Yes.
Rossi, he also has a positive impact on the team. And I think it's Otmar, who's now with the team as well, and he's doing a great job. Whether or not you're a huge fan of him, I think he's really helped the team a lot. So,
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, so since 2021, the team has one race win, two podiums, and a total of 254 points since becoming a team in 2021. And they are currently fourth in the constructors, and they are just over 200 points behind Mercedes, but only 4 points ahead of McLaren. So there's a very clear difference between third and fourth, but it's all like neck and neck after, the top three.
Yeah, no, I mean, them and McLaren will battle it out for the rest of the year, but at first glance, Alpine's best, the rest of the best, the best of the
Yeah.
rest.
Yeah.
They're competitive pretty
Mhm.
year in, year out.
Yeah. They have two aggressive drivers on their team. I'm curious to see what it's going to look like next year. We do talk about it in some of the other episodes, so check out 24 and 25 if you want to hear us talk about the summer fiascos that's happening around lately. But yeah, so we don't know who's going to be driving for them. Alonso announced that he will be racing for Aston Martin next year, but Ocon is signed until the end of 2024 right now. So and then, of course, some notable drivers of Alpine: Michael Schumacher under Benetton, Fernando Alonso under Renault, and now again with Alpine. And then Daniel Ricciardo was with Renault as well.
A rich history for a team that, hard to keep track of who's who.
Yeah. You know how people are talking about Mick possibly going to Alpine
Yeah.
and how coincidental it would be that his dad also technically drove for the team? And
True.
everyone thinks that he's going to be like this Ferrari prodigy because of his dad, but his
Hmm.
dad also technically won with Alpine. So it's not it's not out of the question that he could be, or like Mercedes as well. Like people talked about Mercedes. I don't think he'll be at Mercedes, but Alpine is also a very strong contender for him to go. His dad was kind of all over the place, so it would not
I
be out of the question.
No, yeah, I think that second seat can go to anyone from Mick to Daniel to really anyone who
Yeah.
can get out of their contracts or is not in a contract. So I don't think it's out of the question. Yeah, so we can start with Fernando Alonso. Right off the bat, I'll just go ahead and say there is a lot here. There's a lot of seasons of racing. I'm not really going to talk about his junior karting career. He was good. He was good. He made it to F1. We'll start there. So Fernando Alonso's full name is Fernando Alonso Diaz. He is a Spanish driver, often credited with popularizing the sport in Spain. He is one of the Spanish drivers along with Carlos Sainz Jr., currently at Ferrari. His car number is 14. He was born July 29th, 1981. He is 41 years old and is the oldest driver in F1 by a good amount. Fernando has driven for quite a few teams. His rookie year started with Minardi. He then went to Renault, McLaren, Renault again, Ferrari, McLaren again, and now Alpine, which is just Renault again. So he has been around. He has homie hopped, as Megan would like to say. He has not always ended on the best terms with these teams, and I don't want to rag on the guy, so I won't get too into his controversies, but they're there. He is not above taking his ex back. The man loves hitting up old flames. A lot to unpack here. So in his career, he has 32 wins, 98 podiums, 22 poles, and two World Driver Championships, which were won consecutively. He became the youngest driver to win back-to-back World Driver Championships. One quick note I wanted to say on the 32 wins in his career. This kind of has to do with Max and Lewis and
Mhm.
just how unprecedented both of them have been in their careers early on for Lewis and right now for Max. 32 wins in Alonso's career, and he's one of the best F1 drivers. I think Max is expected to already surpass his win total by the end of this year,
Mhm.
which is unreal to me.
Yeah.
And even among the great drivers, there is still tears and like different levels that, some drivers just like can't get to. It's just something I wanted to call out because I thought it was unreal.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
crazy. I'm
it
also
is.
curious, how do you know how, like, many of those were earned either before Lewis entered and or after Lewis and Max were in it?
So most. So I do not think Fernando has a win since Max has entered F1. I think Fernando's last or his last win was the 2013 Spanish Grand Prix.
Okay.
So his last win was right before Lewis took off at Mercedes.
Yeah.
Also worth coming back to I think I called this out in an earlier episode. No driver in the history of F1 has won a race past his 300th race. So Fernando fits the trend. I believe Lewis will break the trend.
Yeah.
But to this day, I mean, Fernando's last win was almost 10 years ago. And that is how long he has been in F1. One last thing, Fernando is known to have very different on-track and off-track personalities. He has been called out on this by the media at times. He's a dick. Fernando Alonso is an asshole, but in reality, he is super shy, and a
Yeah.
lot of this on track kind of ego swagger that he carries himself with, he has admitted is like a very fabricated thing that he is used to stay in F1 and kind of get what he wants in F1.
I mean, you have to give him credit for that
Yeah,
because it's I mean, as an extroverted person, I don't fully understand. Like, to me, I would just be me all the time and just
yeah.
very loud and annoying. But I know for some people who maybe are more introverted, and like being able to put on this whole persona and use that as like, it's kind of like acting, right? Because you're pretending to be something you're not for such a long period of time, and like creating this character for yourself so you can get through something. And that takes a lot of commitment because
It's a
I don't
skill in itself. I mean, how many drivers have we seen flame out because they're too timid? I mean, we've all, even like Mick, we've wanted
yeah.
him to be like more like, come on, like get
Yeah.
mad, you know? Yeah, put his fist up. It's definitely a good skill to have. It's a better skill to know how to moderate it, which maybe Fernando has not known how to do the
Yeah.
best at times. He has been involved in some controversies, which I will touch on briefly. I do not want to spend like 15 minutes ragging on him, but he has had a couple different controversies regarding to brake checking that has led to crashes behind him. Some he has been penalized for, some he has not. He has blocked multiple teammates and multiple people during qualifying. He was penalized after blocking, I believe, Lewis after qualifying, which led to his infamous quote of "I no longer consider F1 a sport." Uh, then there is Crashgate, which led to McLaren or Renault being investigated for fixing races, and Spygate, which is a whole thing that involved McLaren, Ferrari, and I think Renault at the end of the day. So not the smoothest ride during his time in F1. For his F1 debut, he debuted in 2001 with Minardi. He was mostly uncompetitive and he finished 23rd in the World Driver Championship. I think there was 24 drivers at the
Okay.
time. So I think last place was his teammate. So he was showing that he was just, I don't know that his teammate ever beat him. So I think he was just clear above. I don't think the Minardi F1 team made it to 2002. So in 2002, he was signed to Renault as a test driver. And in 2003, he was promoted to the full-time F1 seat. He broke a record as the youngest driver to both win pole and a race at the Hungarian Grand Prix that year. He finished sixth in the World Driver Championship with 55 points. Also worth noting, you might know better than I don't know the full distribution, but the point breakdown back then was different than we see nowadays. I think there's a lot more points available to
Hmm.
score now.
Hmm.
So a lot of these like last season point totals where, he'll
Yeah.
finish fourth with like 60 points. It's just of the time point scoring
Yeah.
was different.
They also had less races at the time too, so that had an
Yes.
impact. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So 2004 saw an improved season, even though he had no wins. Fourth in the World Driver Championship, 59 points. So improvement. And then 2005 was when he won his first World Driver Championship. So he saw success pretty early on. In 2005, Fernando battled Kimi Räikkönen, friend of the show, for the World Driver Championship. New regulations that year that engines had to last at least 2 races before they were swapped went in Alonso's favor because his Renault was much more reliable than Kimi's Ferrari, even if it was slower, which I don't know. Doesn't that sound familiar?
Yeah.
So he ended up winning that year. He passed Emerson Fittipaldi as the youngest World Driver Championship. That year, he had 7 wins, 6 poles, 14 podiums, and 133 points. So very impressive season from Fernando. Established himself as one of the best, if not obviously the best driver in F1 at that point. In 2006, he had his second World Driver Championship. So he followed it up very, very well. And his main competitor was Michael Schumacher and Ferrari. Not a lot of people can claim that they took that man down. You know, Michael Schumacher, for most, is probably the best driver of all time. Fernando Alonso beat him. So Fernando won 6 of the first 9 races and finished no lower than second in those 9 races. So it was first, then second. So
wow.
A lot of points right up front. But then after some FIA rulings and changes that slowed Alonso's car a bit, Schumacher came on later in the season and they were tied on points going into the second to last race at the Japanese Grand Prix. Alonso won that race and then just needed 1 point to at the final race to win. And he became the youngest double world driver champion after that. So, early on in his career, he wins his 2 and only world driver championships against pretty tight competition. I don't know if you had any thoughts about his early career.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like you said, he was going against Michael, who had been in F1 for a little bit longer because he had started winning championships in the 90s and then again in the 2000s, early 2000s. So he was going up against tight competition and someone that was well more experienced and adversed in F1. So I can totally see, why people thought that he was going to continue to win championships and why he was going to be this young prodigy that people see someone like Max Verstappen as or Lewis Hamilton as when he was starting up. So, really impressive.
Yeah, so he was considered one of the prodigies of F1, a young driver who we, could have seen win many more world driver championships. And as we're going to see, he almost did.
Yeah.
But he has a nasty streak of runner-up finishes in the World Driver Championship in the middle part of his career. So after his 2 championships with Renault, he then moved to McLaren in 2007. This was the year that he was partnered with rookie Lewis Hamilton. And we talked about this season when we talked about Lewis. They ended up tied on points. Lewis had more second place finishes. So Alonso ended 3rd, Lewis 2nd. I believe Kimi Räikkönen won the championship that year. He had 4 wins that season. And, this was all overshadowed by just the tumultuous season he had at McLaren and the bad relationship he had with Lewis at the time. Since repaired, but it was not great at the time. To just his relationship with Lewis was fast. Fernando was fast. There was a time when Lewis disobeyed team orders, and that hurt Fernando. Fernando responded by holding him up in qualifying in the pit lane and not letting him get his fastest lap. It cost McLaren 15 constructors points. It gave him a really big grid penalty. And maybe worst of all, him and Lewis kind of had a blow up separately. And then there was the espionage controversy. I will admit, I do not know the most about this, but at a high level, what happened was that there was accusations that a previous Ferrari employee took classified technical information with him to McLaren to start, to work with them. And they were using data from the Ferrari car that was not supposed to be seen. Where Alonso gets involved in this is after the incident where he held up Lewis in the pits. the McLaren team boss and team management at the time confronted him and his trainer about it and were threatening, a lot of disciplinary actions. So then Alonso threatened to turn in all his emails regarding the ongoing investigation. And I'll leave it at that. It turned into a big mess and it fractured the relationship between Alonso and McLaren. It was basically irreparable at that time. And they mutually agreed to terminate his contract after that.
Oh, damn.
I don't know how much you know about that Spygate.
No.
It's, whew,
I gotta look into that.
Yeah, I think to this day, the FIA ruling on it is still the harshest or largest fine that an F1 team has ever had to pay. I don't know the exact numbers, but it was a really big deal. And Alonso really, really ratcheted it up when he got in trouble for holding up Lewis.
Wow. Yeah.
2008, he rejoined Renault. He was not allowed to join a direct McLaren competitor. I think Renault was a bit of a mid to backfield team at the time. He did get a win in Singapore, but his win became known as Crashgate. So another little controversy. Renault ordered his teammate Nelson Piquet Jr. to crash on purpose to trigger a safety car to benefit Alonso with pit strategy, and he ended up winning the race. Renault was eventually investigated for race fixing, and
wow.
A lot of this investigation into race fixing is what led Alonso to Ferrari and to leave the team. He just kind of wanted to leave that all behind him, even though it benefited him. But yeah, 2009, he stayed with Renault. Car was not competitive. And he was with Ferrari the next year. So his time with Ferrari was mostly highlighted by losing to Seb, in the World Driver Championship. Sebastian Vettel obviously winning 4. Alonso finished second in the World Driver Championship 3 out of his 5 seasons at Ferrari, which eventually he did not feel like they could field a competitive car for the World Driver Championship.
Fair.
And that is what led to him, leaving the team. He had a very, very strong disagreement with team principal Marco Mattiacci, and he left Ferrari in 2014, I believe was his last season there. He went back to McLaren. I don't know why. I don't know how. But he was there. He was there from 2015 to 2018 and was actually contractually there until 2019. But he did his fake retirement in 2018, and to fulfill his contract, stayed on as a team ambassador in 2019 and did some testing for them. They did not bring him back in 2020. I can't imagine. I don't know how he went back to a workplace like that where there was so much turmoil, and I'm sure management was a little different, but just
still,
I just can't. I just don't get it.
No.
But he was there for 4 years or 4 seasons and didn't really do much. Like I said, his last win was almost 10 years ago. I'm just kind of going through the teams he's been in since then. He came out of retirement in 2021, signed to Alpine. He has been good there. The team has been pretty fast, especially for a midfield team. But Alpine's only win in that time was Ocon, which Alonso did help him get that win with some good defense, I think against Lewis. And next year he is set to go to Aston Martin. I just kind of flew through his career. There's a lot. You could spend an hour on each season, on each controversy. Just off the top, do you have any thoughts, any surprises?
Yeah, I mean, I think really his comeback into F1 is the most surprising to me because he wasn't, not to say he was a bad driver, but like you said, his last win was in 2013. So from 2014 to 2018, it's not like he was the most competitive or the top of the ring, driver. And so, and he's also one of the more older drivers. So you just kind of expected him to be out for good. And then when he came back, it's like, oh, you want to just race with Kimi Räikkönen and stuff. You're there for shits and gigs. You're not actually there to compete. And he has made it very, very known, especially this year, I think, more so than last year, that he's in it to win. He's in it to race. He still has it in him. So I'm excited to see what he does at Aston Martin, but at the same time, I don't think the Aston Martin car is going to be what everyone expects it to be until they get a better sponsor in there, like Audi or something. So I don't know. I'm curious to see what happens. I also do kind of hope Seb does the same thing where like his last few years haven't been the best. So he comes out, out for 2 or 3 years, then comes back and does like an Alonso and is
Yeah.
just like up there again in the top 10, like where he should be. But yeah, I don't know. I think he has, yeah, like you said, he has a ton of history. So
Yeah, if there's any diehard Fernando Alonso fans out there listening, I'm sorry if it seems like I just kind of glossed over a lot because I
yeah,
did. There's just so much there, and I would be here for 5 hours
no
talking.
one's gonna listen to a 2 hour episode, I swear.
Yeah. But yeah, that's Fernando Alonso, a bit of a controversial figure in F1.
hmm
Not so much anymore, was in the past, did a bit of a public image rehabilitation over the last 5 years.
Did him well, but then I mean, you say that, but then he's still holding up people in 2021, 2022, and
I think as long as he's not crashing people on purpose anymore and stuff like that. But yeah,
yeah.
he is not my favorite driver. He is easy to get rubbed the wrong way by. I know he is one of Megan's least favorite drivers.
Mm,
I think whether we like it or not, he is
yeah.
going to be around and he's going to be talked about on this podcast for the foreseeable future. So
Yeah. I'll just talk about how his performance is and just keep it at that. So, Esteban Ocon, he was born on September 17th, 1996 in Normandy, France, which for all of my geography fans, that's the northern region of France. Um, I want to go. I want to go. I haven't gone yet. It'd be cool to see. Anyways, interesting fact I learned about Ocon was that when he was competing in karting, his parents had actually sold his family home and dad's garage to help fund his karting career. And they made their minivan or van into kind of like a caravan, like a in-living van, so that they could live and travel to his locations for the racing season. So I thought that was pretty interesting. He doesn't have the typical silver spoon or well-funded career in motorsport like a lot of guys have, especially early on. So to see his parents, also he started pretty late in karting. He was at the age of 10. So for his parents to commit so much to a karting career and not really knowing what the outcome was going to be, it's cool to see that it paid off. But
yeah, that's a lot of pressure.
yeah, right? For like a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he started his career in 2006, and by his second year in karting, he had won the 2007 French Championship, and he was racing against the likes of Antoine Hubert and Pierre Gasly. He spent 3 years in KF3 karting along with a few other championships, and he then won the title in 2010 and was runner-up in the Euro Series in 2011 behind Max Verstappen. So again, like racing a lot of these guys very early on. When he was 14, he was also signed with Gravity Sports Management, and that was a sister company of Renault F1. So you kind of see his connection with Renault very, very early on in his career. But in 2012, Ocon made his debut in single seaters, and he raced in the Euro Renault series, which a lot of other drivers did. He had a few scoring finishes, and he had one podium in his home race at the Power Card. He remained in the series for the next year with Art Racing Junior Team, and he had one pole position and two other podium finishes and ended the season in third behind Pierre Gasly and Oliver Rowland, which no one knows Oliver Rowland. He's currently a Formula E driver. So also with Nick DeVries. But in 2013, though, he made his F3 debut in Prima, which many drivers have driven through Prima or are currently in Prima. So definitely a known team if you watch F3 or even F2 or whatever. Great team to watch. But he stalled at the start of the race and still finished 10th, which if I stalled, I would just get out of the car and walk away. He continued to race with them in 2014, and he led the championship for the majority of the season. He was actually crowned the Euro F3 Euro Championship in 2014 with 3 races still remaining.
Oh wow. Yeah.
And mind you, he was driving against drivers like Max Verstappen that year, so he beat him by quite a long shot, which I think is pretty cool. He finished on podium 21 of 33 races that year. He won 9 and had 15 pole positions. So pretty good. And in 2015, though, he competed in the GP3 series with Art Racing. And although he only technically won one race because 2 others he was disqualified for penalties, he did win the championship by 8 points. And then in 2016, he drove for Mercedes in the DTM series for the first 10 races, along with his Formula One reserve driving role with Renault. He had scored 2 points in the series before his promotion into the F1 seat mid-season, which I'll get into. But he finished 9th in his first race at Zandvoort and was eventually replaced by Felix Rosenqvist, which he's also a relatively known motorsport driver. He's got a whole career, but anywho, going into Formula One now, just to foreshadow, it seemed like Ocon had quite a bit of Formula One experience before finally becoming an F1 driver. I think he seemed to be like tiptoeing in the car a little bit, at least more so than some other drivers did, like Tsunoda. He just kind of was plopped in there, other than his his FP1 testing.
Yeah.
And then also Ocon, like I had said earlier, he had some penalties. He seems to have a lot of penalties. He also seems to regularly finish 1 or 2 positions lower than he qualifies or 1 or 2 positions higher than he qualifies. He's
Okay.
always just hopping around depending on how he feels today or how the car feels today. It's just he's always around, but
Mhm.
he doesn't have as many drastic increases or drastic decreases unless there's like, car issues and stuff. So
Which I feel like is a sign of a pretty good driver.
consistency.
Albeit he is pretty aggressive. I think
Yes.
he's a pretty timid guy, so that goes
Mhm.
under the radar. He is a very aggressive driver.
Yeah, him and Fernando. While I do really like them together, that Saudi Arabian battle between the two, where they were just kind of like dicking around and like passing each other up. I mean, they were just like it was like cat and dog, and just like waiting for a crash. Like they obviously got team orders eventually, but one
Yeah.
of the most exciting memories I think I have of the season so far was
Yeah.
just their little like boop 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 boop. Yeah. So, but yeah, no, he's pretty aggressive. Has quite a lot of penalties over his time in F1. Definitely some points too towards his driver's license or driver's thing. So driver's license, yeah, you get it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so at 18 years old in 2014, he had his first experience in an F1 car driving the Lotus E20 as part of a 2-day testing. And then he also made another debut for a practice session at Abu Dhabi with Lotus, which also, as a reminder, Lotus was Renault. So then in May in 2015, Ocon was called by Force India to drive in a post-race test in Barcelona after one of their drivers was forced to withdraw due to illness. So this is also an example of when a reserve driver is just kind of popped in whenever someone's sick or there's an issue. But prior to claiming his GP3 title, he was also announced that he would enter the Mercedes junior team. So did not know he's part of the Mercedes junior team. I thought he was just always very strictly Renault. So, but this Mercedes tie very much comes into his career as well. You kind of see it. But in early 2016, it was announced that he would be the reserve driver for Renault Sport, and he took place in a couple of practice sessions during a couple of different Grand Prix. But then in August of 2016, after the summer break, driver Rio Harinato was dropped from Manor Racing after his sponsors had failed to meet their contractual obligations. So then with that, Ocon was named as his replacement for the second half of the season and made his Formula One full-time debut at the Belgian Grand Prix, which is the Belgian Grand Prix is what we're coming up to. Very excited. It's one of my favorites. But anywho, he finished 16th at that race, and his best result was 12th at the Brazilian Grand Prix. It was a wet race, so also pretty impressive for not crashing.
Yeah.
Uh, he was actually in like ready to earn points, but he dropped out of points in the final lap. So
Ah.
yeah, he's very very good at losing his points at the like last 1 or 2 laps. That became a trend, but. In late 2016, Force India announced that they would actually sign Ocon for the full 2017 season as part of a multi-year contract with Mercedes.
Okay.
So he would then be racing along Sergio Perez, which to foreshadow, they did not get along. Not fans, not friends. I think they've made up now, but they had a lot of issues with Force India. I'll try and speed through it, but Yeah, so his first debut race with them was at the Australian Grand Prix. He finished 10th in his first 3 races of the season and finished 7th at the Russian Grand Prix. And he continued his point streak with 5th place at the Spanish Grand Prix. So his first couple of 5, 6 races, he was earning points. But then he had a 12th place finish in Monaco, and which, obviously not on points. So after getting 12th in Monaco, Ocon recorded 12 consecutive point finishes, but he was often seen in crash incidents or just incidents in general with his teammate Perez. So, for example, at the Canadian Grand Prix, Perez ignored requests from the team to let Ocon pass so that he could challenge Daniel Ricciardo for third, which left Perez and Ocon eventually finishing 5th and 6th, respectively. Because for Perez, if he wasn't going to get it, no one was. So fair, which the two drivers then collided at Aspergine and forced Perez into retirement, which gave Ocon a puncture. Ocon was still able to recover and finish 6th, which I thought was pretty impressive after having some issues early on. But they did make contact shortly again at the Belgian Grand Prix, where Ocon was squeezed towards the wall. And this led to a collision that ended Perez's race, and Ocon then still went to finish 9th. So it was a lot of really bad, almost like scary situations for Ocon, but then still somehow managing to get points. He was obviously furious with Perez and that they had risked their lives, which is then when Force India finally started to initiate more team orders for the two,
Yeah.
because they weren't able to do it for themselves.
Worth just really, just real quick mentioning, I feel like it's easy to rag on one or the other, but these are two drivers. These are two aggressive and fast drivers who have maybe gotten both Ocon and Perez have gotten kind of the short end of the stick multiple times throughout their career.
Yeah.
And I think both want to make it, and I think just neither wanted to back off.
And although I don't think they necessarily had like a 1 and 2 driver in this situation, Perez was doing better race over race. Like, he did have more points every single season that they raced together with Force India. So they're obviously, from Perez's side, like, he was obviously frustrated when it felt like Ocon was getting in his way and he could have been doing more.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if Ocon was performing better, that's when you just have to let him go.
Yeah.
You also see this a lot with McLaren, where it's not every time that Daniel is necessarily doing better than Lando, but when he is, or when he could pass him and the team's not letting him do that, it causes a lot of tension. So
yeah.
But then at the Italian Grand Prix, Ocon started in 3rd place, which was his highest grid position start of his career, but he only finished 6th. And that's another example where he starts high, ends fine. And then again, he did the same thing in Mexico, started 3rd, finished 5th. So a lot of streaks of finishing, in these, near 7th end positions. What he collided with Romain Grosjean at the Brazilian Grand Prix, and that was the end to his 12 consecutive point scoring races.
Yep.
He finished his first full season in F1 8th in the Drivers' Championship with 87 of the team's 187 points. So not far off from Perez, but of course Perez was also out of a couple of races, largely due to his issues with Ocon. Then in 2018, Ocon continued to drive with Perez. He had his first points 10th place at Bahrain. Then in Aspergine, he was involved in a first lap collision with Kimi Räikkönen, which ended his race, while Perez would then go on to claim a podium finish. So that was kind of like a Uno reverse for them.
Yeah.
Ocon scored points for a few of the following races, but retired in France after another first lap collision. 3 more point finishes followed before the summer break. And like you'll see in Drive to Survive, after the Hungarian Grand Prix, Force India was forced to they were in severe financial trouble and faced liquidation from a group called HM Revenue Customs. It was a group of creditors, including teammate Perez, who took legal action against the team and put it into administration, which did save the team from collapse and the jobs of its employees. And these assets were later purchased by a series of investors led by Canadian businessman Lawrence Stroll, who is, as we all know, the father of driver Lance Stroll. And Lance Stroll at the time was driving for Williams. They were over at that team. They were unhappy with Williams. So why not come into Force India and start new? So these new owners confirmed that Ocon Ocon and Perez would remain the drivers for the remainder of the season. But it was obviously revealed that, one of these were going to have to go at the end of the season because Lance Stroll would then obviously be coming on to join the team. And it was rumored actually that Ocon was to join Renault for 2019 before the team unexpectedly signed Daniel Ricciardo, which left Ocon's future kind of in doubt. So it was pretty intense for both Ocon and Perez because they both had their jobs on the line, and you'll see that a little bit in Drive to Survive. I think it's the first season. So at the new team's kind of first race now with Lawrence kind of more in it, and it's called Racing Point Force India. This was the Belgian Grand Prix after the summer break. Ocon had another high starting position in his career. He again started third, but only finished sixth. And Ocon and Perez then collided on the first lap in Singapore, which is Ocon's third first lap crash of the season, which is a lot. I mean, even Mick hasn't done that. But it caused Ocon to crash into the wall and ended his race. They were pretty upset, obviously, called it unacceptable. They banned the drivers from racing each other, so they were no longer, again, able to kind of do what Alonso and Ocon like to do for fun now. But so he had 2 ninth place finishings after that, but he was then disqualified from 8th place at the US Grand Prix after his car was found to have exceeded fuel flow limits. Also an issue. I don't think it was entirely his fault. I do think it's more of the team's fault. Still impacted him because it was his car.
Right.
But at the Brazilian Grand Prix, he then collided with race leader Max Verstappen because he was trying to unlap himself, and it damaged both cars. They were still able to finish the race, and Ocon received a 10-second stop-and-go penalty for the incident. Now, knowing Verstappen still finished second, so it wasn't like it ended his entire race, they argued a lot afterwards and were pushing each other several times. They got called to the FIA, and Verstappen was ordered to undertake 2 days of public service at the discretion of the FIA for making deliberate physical contact with Ocon, which I did not know.
I did not know this. Wow.
That's pretty intense. As you can see, and like we've talked about this too with even Max Verstappen, he's a very aggressive driver, a very aggressive person, and it's great to see him calmed down so much more this season because he did have a really big temper issue, and definitely very obvious in this year in 2018 when he was with Red Bull. Oh, I was with Red Bull, but
right.
He finished that year in 12th of the Drivers' Championship and scored 49 points, while Perez scored 62. So not much lower than Perez, but obviously still lower. And he was then the driver that was kicked out so Stroll could come in. So knowing that he would be replaced, he was announced as the reserve driver for Mercedes in 2019. So not much there. He was the reserve driver there. Obviously, he had been paired with Mercedes for quite a while, so it just made sense for him to come in. And he came back in 2020 in a full-time F1 seat on a 2-year contract with Renault. So he drove alongside Daniel Ricciardo then for the 2020 season. He made his debut race with Renault at the Austrian Grand Prix, and he qualified 14th, but finished 8 out of 11 finishers. So he was in points, but there was a lot of crash, a lot of people out. And then in the next race, he qualified 5th and was running 7th, but he had to retire due to cooling issues. So he this year too, along with Daniel Ricciardo, were having a lot of issues. If they weren't in the top 10, they were probably getting out because of car issues or crashes. He had suffered a grid penalty at the 70th anniversary Grand Prix for impeding George Russell in qualifying. So again, he had to start 14th, but yet again finished 8th. And then his best race finish since 2017 came at the Belgian Grand Prix, where he qualified 6th and finished 5th behind Daniel Ricciardo. Again, like he suffered a lot of car issues, whether it was brakes or like his brakes were on fire in Tuscany. He had hydraulics issues in France. And then later on at the Secure Grand Prix, he improved to 5th place by lap 54. And it was assisted by a lot of collisions on the opening lap and many drivers making pit stops early on, or second pit stops afterwards. And there was actually a virtual safety car that came into Fury during the crash where 3rd place Sainz and 4th place Ricciardo attempted to take advantage of it, and they entered the pits. However, while they were still in the pits, the safety car period ended. So it no longer became a benefit to them. And so then, bumped Ocon pretty much into 3rd place. He was shortly overtaken, though, by former teammate Perez. So then that obviously put him out of the podium, but there were pit stop issues for both Mercedes drivers, which allowed Ocon to claim his first F1 podium in second and Renault's best race finish since 2010.
Nice.
Obviously, shortly after Ricardo came and, also I think he won a race too with them, but
Mhm.
it was great to see them finally get on podium.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, with all of that, he ended the season again in 12th and had only 62 of the 181 team points.
Daniel
So
Ricciardo used to be good.
he was great. Don't doubt him, guys. Yeah. So Ocon, he's always been, when he's good, he's great. But he's very much a midfield driver where it's very hit or miss. He's never, it's usually luck that brings him up to the top and bad luck that brings him out of the race entirely with the cars. So in 2021, with Daniel now at McLaren, Alonso came to join him with the newly branded Alpine team. And although he had a rough start with Vettel in the beginning, the first race of the season, he had a collision with them that at the first Grand Prix, he finished ninth at the next one and scored the newly rebranded team's first points alongside Alonso, who was in 10th. So at the second race, ninth and 10th, which is, yeah, pretty standard for them. He had a series of point finishes as well. Following that, he had seventh and then two ninth place finishes. But then he had also had a series of issues with various car failures, tire wear. He really struggled with tire wear and just collisions with drivers. Then at the Hungarian Grand Prix, after having started eighth, he had there were multiple collisions ahead of him, which helped him pretty much get all the way up into second place. And then it turned into first after Hamilton pitted in dry weather tires a lap ahead of everyone else. And he was able to hold off Vettel throughout the end of the race, which led Ocon to maintain that first position and score his first Formula One win, which was great. It's a great episode too. I think they covered that too in Drive to Survive.
Mhm.
But this was followed then by 3 more point finishes and a really crazy P10 finish on intermediate tires at the wet Turkish Grand Prix. He did not pit at all. And that hasn't happened since 1997, where they don't pit and they still are able to finish a race. So even though he had really bad tire management issues early on in the season, this kind of took everyone by surprise. It was pretty crazy to witness, to see him not pit at all. And there is photos flying around somewhere that, like, at least they were in Twitter like a year ago,
Yeah.
of the tires, and
Oof.
they looked gross. Like they were falling apart. They were barely together. It's like me on a Sunday after like that wedding and then having to record a podcast.
Meg, I was about to say the tires looked like ground beef, and then you said it looks like me on a Sunday. I was like, God, I can't say it
Can't say
anymore.
that.
I said
Oh
it
yeah, but
anyway.
ground beef. I mean, ground beef. Yeah, more accurate.
Sorry, minced beef for our UK
Minced.
listeners.
I have to start saying that now. So
Yeah.
I was actually side note, I was talking to Timo at Undercut Podcast and I said something was garbage and in quotes I said rubbish.
Rubbish.
Because yeah, more language friendly. But
Mhm.
so yeah, anyways, he had a couple other points that season, but a lot of collisions as well. He also had what I think was a really heartbreaking end to the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, where he was up in third for quite a bit. And just at the very end, like going into the last turn, Bottas passed him and took that third place. And it was so sad. Very upset because Ocon doesn't have as many opportunities to get up there. So to see him, have that luck. There were also a lot of crashes and a lot of things happening at that Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. It's one of the longest races I've ever watched. But yeah, pretty heartbreaking for him. Rough end to the season. So far in 2022, he has finished 7th in the opening race, even after receiving a penalty for colliding with Mick. He also had some testy back and forth with his teammate that we mentioned at the second race in Saudi Arabia. But he did have team orders that told him to hold position behind him, and he finished 6th. He's finished in points quite a few times. He's received a lot of penalties a few times, and he's had engine issues a few times. But even with all of that, he's still an 8th in the championship and signed with Alpine through the end of 2024. So yeah, a lot of things that have happened with him. He's a driver that's definitely done a lot or has been noticed or like mentioned a lot, just because it's either he's involved in penalties, crashes, DNFs, or surprising points or finishes and stuff. So
Yeah. I kind of forgot that him and Perez were like each other's arch nemesis for a while.
yeah, well, that's why when I think about this season, I'm like, there really aren't any drivers that have an intense driver pairing, and we just really haven't seen anything like that this year. which is I mean, it's nice. It's kind of a refreshing to see, but
Yeah.
yeah, there was so much drama, whether it was like Perez and him, or even Vettel and Charles for a little bit at Ferrari.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Even
it's
like
interesting.
even Alonso and Ocon, like they're pretty
Mhm.
competitive with each other because they're about as fast as each other is.
Yeah.
But somehow they seem to get along off track
I
like
think it's
very
because they're
well.
a lot alike, to be honest. They're
Yes.
both very generally timid people, but they're assholes on the track.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
So
Yeah. I did not know about the fighting incident with Max. That is funny.
no, I didn't know that either. I thought that was fast. I mean, it's very on brand for the both of them, but also very funny that Max got punished for
Yeah.
hitting him like a child, kind of like you pushed him, and so now you're
I'm
community service.
I'm surprised there's not more, tussles in
Yeah.
F1. There is a good amount in NASCAR.
Yeah. Well, also when I watched my first hockey game, I was shocked. They like stopped the clock to let people fight.
Yeah.
I didn't
Oh
know
yeah.
that.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
never
yeah,
watched a
yeah.
hockey game until this year. So I was so confused.
Yeah, if both players like agree to it, you just
Mhm.
squabble up a couple minutes, send each person in the timeout afterwards, and
Yeah.
get a move on with it. Sometimes the whole team start fighting,
Yeah. Yeah, it's
but
crazy.
I wish Drive to Survive was around during Alonso's like McLaren Ferrari days. I
Mhm.
think that would be some show business.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
glad Drive to Survive was around during Ocon and Perez's,
Yeah.
battles back in the day. This team moving forward, I think they'll finish fourth in the constructors. I think they'll edge out McLaren just because they have
Yeah.
two drivers who are regularly on it.
Mhm. They're more
Um,
consistent. I agree. Even though I do like McLaren, I don't think they're going to get it this year.
mhm. What's it got to take for you to not root for McLaren anymore? Because if Daniel's not there, if one day Lando's not there, is that really even the McLaren you love anymore?
I mean, if Piastri goes to McLaren, I love Piastri. So
Okay.
I
All right.
very much cheer for him. But
Okay. That's fair. All right.
we've got a race
Yeah,
this weekend.
we do have a race this weekend. I'm very excited. Oh, wait, we could do this again. Megan, any predictions?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so it's Spa, right? And Spa,
Mhm.
first of all, one of my favorite races. Also, Ocon usually does well here. Also, Pierre also usually does well here. I see them both in points.
Mhm.
That's all I'm gonna go. I'm not gonna go any higher. I think they're gonna be in points.
Yeah.
Mick will be in the top eight.
Ooh, okay.
Top eight. Um,
It might rain.
I know, and I'm so concerned. I think it's gonna be a different win. I don't think Max is going to win. I think it's gonna be Perez, Charles, or Carlos. Oh, no, Perez, Charles, or Lewis Hamilton
Okay.
win Spa.
I think Lewis or Max win because I think they're the two best
Best.
rain or wet condition
Mhm.
drivers. Wait, I'm sorry. I shouldn't even have to. They're the two best drivers.
Yeah, that too.
But with the wet, I think obviously that's the biggest equalizer. I think
Mhm.
I don't know, man. Max is fast in the rain.
Lando usually does pretty well. Carlos usually does pretty well in the rain. Sergio usually does pretty well in the rain. I mean, it's
Is it here's an interesting point before we go. Is it
mhm,
weird? Is not weird. Is it funny that Max is good in the rain because generally the best rain drivers are the more even keeled,
mhm.
kind of less aggressive drivers.
Yeah,
I don't know how he doesn't just spin out trying to be Max Verstappen every time there's rain.
genuinely. And that's where it's like it's talent because he
Yeah,
is
yeah,
always so aggressive, and yet when the rain comes, he just knows how to handle it.
yeah. So, yeah, I won't predict too much. I think Lewis podiums again. I think George is in the
Okay.
top 5. I think Ferrari has a bounce back weekend, but I don't think they win.
No. But they need a bounce back weekend. They need a win to have a bounce back weekend. They need to
I'm
both be in
sorry.
points to have a
They
bounce back.
need Charles to podium.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We will be back with a race recap after the Belgian Grand Prix. Megan, any parting words for our loyal listeners?
No, just be sure to watch and tune in and follow us on social media.
At BreakCheck F1, all socials.
Yeah.
See you.